Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the horrific explosion in Beirut. It looked like something right out of the movies. The impact of the explosions that rocked Beirut was cataclysmic. The storage depot in the port of Beirut exploded. And then Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, once a beautiful city, came crumbling down. Experts say that this explosion was one of the largest, if not the largest, non-nuclear explosion in history. The numbers of victims and injured was high and continued to climb. There was rubble, and so much rubble, so many people reported missing, that more and more deaths are inevitable because of the reality of such a blast. We have no clear idea of the total size and the true size of the devastation, and we will not have a real idea for a long time to come. When looking at the footage, it appears that there were 3 blasts in the port, not as originally reported, 2. The first came as a whitish-gray blast, then a reddish-brown blast, and then finally a white mushroom cloud, a plume of cloud. Cyprus is almost 100 miles away from Beirut. The blast was so loud, the impact so fierce, that the island country not only saw the explosions, Cypriots heard and felt the explosions 100 miles away. Most of the destruction resulting from an explosion does not actually come from the explosion itself, and this is basic physics for those of you that know. Destruction actually comes from the sound waves as they reverberate, much like the famous classic commercial for Memorex with Ella Fitzgerald. The great vocalist sings, and the glass breaks as she reaches a high note. The narrator asks, is it live or is it Memorex? In an earlier version, actually the piece is it Ella or is it Memorex? Sound waves cause destruction. Lebanon is hurting in so many ways. Loss of life, loss of business, loss of infrastructure, and now this devastation, right in smack in the middle of the corona, which has also stung them very, very badly. The estimated cost of damage is $15 billion. That too will climb much higher. Given that Lebanon has a population of only 6.8 million and a GDP of 58 billion, that number is bigger than huge. Stored properly, ammonium nitrate, which is what exploded, is relatively safe. But the more you have and the longer it sits, certainly when it sits in poorly ventilated storage bunkers, the more unstable the powder becomes. Accidents with ammonium nitrate are not unusual. In 2001, let's say, for instance, in Toulouse, France, 2,500 people were injured and 31 were killed in an ammonium nitrate accident. In 2013 in Texas, it caused a huge explosion. 2015 in China, another explosion. They all pale in comparison to the explosion in Beirut in 2020. Ammonium nitrate is most often and most commonly used in fertilizer. People all know that, but it also has a nefarious side, an ugly side. It can be used in other ways. It can be used in bombs. In fact, ammonium nitrate has regularly been used for terrorist bombs. The IRA used it in their bombs in London. The Oklahoma City bomber used it in his bomb. It was used in the Bali nightclub bombings. Just about anywhere and everywhere a huge explosion takes place, it can be traced to ammonium nitrate, and is often used in small explosions as well. These bombs are often placed in cars and in trucks. They are the ammonium nitrate bombs because they fill the entire car or the entire truck. That's what makes them so large. The more ammonium nitrate used, the more destruction ensues. The amount of ammonium nitrate that sat and sat and sat in the port of Beirut is difficult to comprehend. 2,750 tons is a recipe for a very large explosion. To give you a sense of what that is, 2,750 tons is 5,500,000 pounds. So that's 5,500,000 pounds. That is enormous, and that's what exploded. Dangerous by any estimate. This is what an explosion was waiting to happen. There's no question about it. If this was an accident, it could and should have been avoided. If this was an intentional blast, we may never know, because the force of the second and third blast blew up all the evidence. The world has felt Lebanon's pain. Offers of help came from around the world. French President Macron visited Lebanon 2 days after the blast. Saudi Arabia offered assistance, as did England, the United States, the United Nations, and Israel. Israel offered assistance. In the immediate aftermath of the explosions, Israel offered to help in finding victims buried in the rubble. They have experience, and they are the best in the world at this grueling task of finding people in rubble. Israel has standing teams that rush to catastrophes wherever they are, whenever they are permitted to enter, and they save lives. And if not saving the lives, at least find the bodies of the victims. Lebanon said no to the teams. They said no to Israel. They said no to Israeli hospital help also, which was offered. Injured UN forces, especially injured UNIFIL personnel, were, however, evacuated to Israeli hospitals. And on Wednesday night, the night after the explosion, Tel Aviv City Hall lit up an entire building displaying the flag of Lebanon, green, red, and white, with a cedar of Lebanon in the center. It was a gesture. Tel Aviv was saying, we too feel your pain. And that too was rejected. Many voices in Lebanon expressed incredulity. Some people were insulted that Israel, which sometimes bombs Lebanon, would show solidarity with them. Hezbollah head Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah even suggested that it was Israel that blew up the ammonium nitrate in Beirut, much like they are behind the explosions taking place in Iran. They just don't get it. This was not about war, not about politics, not about Arab-Jewish crisis or conflict. This was a tragedy, a colossal tragedy. And tragedy brings out the best in good people and the worst in everyone else. Coming up, points of view. First up is a column from the Times of Israel. It's dated August 6, 2020, and it's written by Sean Derns. Derns is a senior research analyst for the Washington, D.C. office of CAMERA. CAMERA is a 65,000-member Boston-based organization. CAMERA actually stands for the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting and Analysis. It's an exceptional organization. Now, he writes and takes the Washington Post to task. The point of the column is very simple and straightforward: to show a bias of one of the most influential news media outlets in the world, the Washington Post. And this news outlet brazenly presents untruth as truth, that their points are made as axioms, 100% fact, that are simply in dispute, actually. And Dern actually proves this. This is how Dern begins. Facts, Mark Twain once observed, are stubborn things, but statistics are pliable. When it comes to the Israel-Islamist conflict, the Washington Post's global opinion page ignores the facts. The newspaper consistently treats its own standards and ethics as pliable. The July 31st, 2020 op-ed entitled "The 2020 Democratic Platform Betrays Palestinians and Again Gives Israel a Pass" offers the case in point. Writers Huwaida Araf, Zaina Ashrawi Hutchinson, and Sam Hindi, all delegates from the Democratic National Convention, the DNC, use the Post to slander the Jewish state. They write that as Palestinian Americans and delegates to the Democratic National Convention, we are deeply dismayed that the language on Israel-Palestine once again ignores reality and basic Palestinian rights. Yet their argument rests on lies and omission, all of which the Post could have and should have fact-checked. Derns now gives an important analysis, very simple examples of untruths that should have rendered the column unacceptable and should not have been published. Derns writes, the delegates claim that Israeli settlements are Jewish-only colonies built on stolen Palestinian land in the West Bank. This is false. In fact, no sovereign Palestinian Arab state has ever existed. Indeed, the Wall Street Journal noted in the May 16, 2020 correction that was prompted by the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting and Analysis, which is CAMERA, under the Oslo Accords, sovereignty over the West Bank is disputed, pending a final peace settlement, unquote. And the Jewish claim to the land is based on both history and international law. There's a clear difference between the two. One is that the land is stolen and Israel is illegally there, and the other which says that it is in dispute. The difference is tremendous. In another example, Stern shows, once again, how wrong the authors are. They demand that the Democratic National Committee and Convention, the DNC, denounce Israel. He writes, the authors claim that the DNC must affirm that Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem is illegal, although, as noted above, it is anything but. Worse still, they claim that the DNC must affirm that Israel is a state for all of its citizens rather than an ethnically exclusive Jewish state, which is an endorsement of institutionalized racism. Yet, this too is a projection. 20% of Israel's citizens are non-Jews. They serve on Israel's Supreme Court and in the military, run hospitals and large corporations, and enjoy both greater political freedoms and higher standard of living than the Arabs living under the rule of the PA or Hamas. Indeed, Israeli Arabs have voted in 3 democratic elections in Israel in the last 3 years alone. By contrast, Arabs residing under the rule of the PA or Hamas haven't been able to vote for more than a decade. Further, when it comes to institutionalized racism, Jews are forbidden by law from owning or renting land under the PA or Hamas, actually apartheid. Both entities state that their official religion is Islam, another salient fact that the writers ignore. And unlike Israel, both entities rule over a population that is almost entirely Arab Muslim, with Arab Christians having fled in large numbers in recent years. Now Dorn concludes. He writes that in publishing the column, the Washington Post violated its own principles of fairness by printing falsehoods. He writes, the Post's decision to publish the piece violates its own standards and guidelines, which claim that the newspaper is committed to fairness. The newspaper elaborates, fairness results from a few simple practices. No story is fair if it omits facts of major importance or significance. Fairness includes completeness. Further, the Post claims to be committed to disclosing to its readers the sources of the information in its stories to maximum possible extent. The Washington Post is not living up to its own guidelines and standards. Its opinion pages, meant to be a place for honest debate, are increasingly a forum for falsehoods and worse. And not for the first time. The newspaper is, if unintentionally, promoting reworked anti-Semitic canards. Anti-Semitism, the writer Yossi Klein Halevi noted in 2018, turned the Jews into the symbol of whatever is that a given civilization defines as its worst qualities. Now we live in a civilization where the most loathsome qualities are racism, colonialism, and apartheid. And lo and behold, the greatest offender in the world today is the Jewish state. It is a classic continuity of thousands of years of symbolizing the Jew. And increasingly, it can be found in the global opinion pages of the Washington Post. Next up, from the Atlanta Jewish Times, was published on July 24, 2020. It's entitled, How Congressman John Lewis Felt About Israel. This column is a tribute to Congressman John Lewis and was written by Kayleen Ladinsky. The point of the piece is to show how pro-Israel this great congressman was. At the end of her column, I've attached a short clip of John Lewis's speech in support of Israel. This is how Ladinsky begins. In 2011, pressure was mounting in Israel for a two-state solution, and our administration was working on a peace resolution. The message of America's support to defend Israel became unclear in the media and actions of the White House. I had the pleasure of organizing a peaceful rally of Americans united with Israel that included the bipartisan support of both Republican and Democratic. Keynote speaker, the U.S. Congressman Tom Price and John Lewis. I will never forget when I called to ask for the participation of U.S. Representative John Lewis. I spoke to his aide at the time, and he requested detailed information about the event and other participants. I wasn't expecting much, but was hopeful for a yes. 2 days later, I get a call from Lewis's aide. He said to please hold for Congressman Lewis. I was shocked and delighted all at the same time. He got on the phone and we spoke for about 10 minutes. He wanted to know why I believed in Israel, what I wanted to accomplish by gathering members of our community at this rally. Then he gave me his answer. He said he would be honored to participate as a keynote speaker and went on to share his own belief in the importance of America's relationship with Israel. Nothing I write to you in this column could ever fully describe how much more my own love and respect grew for Congressman Lewis that day. Here was the clip.
Thank you very much, my beloved brothers and sisters. I'm delighted, very happy, and very pleased to be here, to be with each of you, Mr. Consular General, my colleague, Tom Price, to be here to stand up with you for your standing up for the state of Israel. As my friend and my colleague stated so well, the state of Israel is our best and closest friend and ally in the Middle East, and we must stand forever with our friend. We must. We have an obligation, a mission, and a mandate to look out for this state, this special state, this special place. Since I've been in that Congress, I visit the state of Israel on 5 different occasions. And each time I have an opportunity to go, I'm deeply inspired. I'm uplifted. I tell you that as a nation and as a people, if we fail to stand and support the state of Israel, history will not be kind. History will not be kind to us. If we fail to stand up, speak up, and speak out for the state of Israel, support the state of Israel, God Almighty will not be kind to any of us. When I was growing up many years ago, as a young boy in rural Alabama, we used to sing a Negro spiritual that went something like, "Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, and tell old Pharaoh to let my people go." We have to say to the enemies of Israel, if you touch Israel, we will touch you. It is our calling, it is our mission to do what we can to stand and be with our friend. It is the only democratic state in the Middle East. A few years ago, when I first got elected to Congress, I traveled with a bipartisan delegation, members of the House and members of the Senate. We went to Russia, and we met with the Supreme Soviet. We had a list of refusement, and we told the leaders of the Supreme Soviet, we have this list. These people want to leave, they want to go to other parts of Europe, but the great majority want to go to Israel. And a few weeks or months later, every single person on that list was allowed to go. We must continue to speak up and speak out for the children of Israel, for the citizens of Israel. These are our brothers and our sisters. These are our friends. Israel is our ally. We can do no less. We must do it. Hang in there. Keep your faith. Have great courage. Good luck. I will be there with you every step of the way.
Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 3 cartoons today. The first cartoon pokes fun on the arrows on the floor of stores that direct us to walk one way and not another way. They're one-way arrows. The caption reads, "Man arrested for putting fake arrow decals on floor in IKEA, for creating a labyrinth with no exit." We've all been in these stores when someone has gone the wrong way, or when we are caught going down the aisle the wrong way. But at IKEA, Long before the pandemic, there were always prescribed pathways. Second up is a cartoon that pokes fun at our new culture of masks. A couple is dating, they're sitting on a bench in the park, and the man says to the woman, "Please, can I see your nose?" She responds, "Not until we're married." The comedic play on uncovering your nose as a form of intimacy that only can happen in the context of family is a wonderful and playful and hilariously funny aspect of our corona culture today. Finally, the last item is a simple statement that has made its way around the social media world. It reads, "Of all the things I learned in grade school, trying to avoid cooties was the last thing I expected to use." Strange as it may seem, cooties is a perfect parallel with corona. That is, the best way to avoid corona is the way you avoided cooties. Stay away and keep up the cootie block. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Glas Polski is a weekly Polish paper in Toronto. It has published an article for the second time that blames COVID on the Jews. No surprise, Glas Polski has also published lies about Jews having created ISIS. They write that Israel is the root of all evil and the devil itself. And if that's not enough for you, they preach that Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Soviet Union, was Jewish. They write that Joseph Goebbels, the head of Nazi propaganda, was really Jewish. They even argue that Turkish President Erdogan is Jewish. B'nai B'rith of Canada has filed a police complaint against Glas Polski for repeatedly spreading lies against Jews. More and more, anti-Semitism is permeating the world. People certainly have freedom of speech, but even that freedom has a limit. The wedding of the grandson of the Belzer Rebbe took place in Jerusalem recently. The wedding was held in the Belz synagogue in Jerusalem, which is enormous. The building can be seen from miles away. After it was built, the synagogue was jokingly referred to as the Third Temple by many of those who live in Jerusalem. Thousands and thousands of people were invited to participate in the wedding. Thousands accepted the invitation, and they were all in close contact. Police officials met with Belzer leadership and explained how unsafe and unwise such a gathering would be. But the wedding went on as planned. The new head of Israel's National COVID Task Force called the wedding a huge potential center for contamination and contagion. He was so upset, he even went so far as to say that events like this play Russian roulette with people's lives. Police fined the organizers 5,000 shekel. That's about $1,400 for violating COVID laws and having such a large gathering. Hardly a large fine. We pray that no one gets infected, but mathematics may prove the opposite. Israel launched OFEC 16, a spy satellite, recently. The spy satellites are very important in terms of Israel's gathering of information. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu actually told his cabinet meeting that, and I'm quoting here, the success of OFEC 16 satellite very much increases our ability to act against Israel's enemies, near and far alike. It greatly expands our ability to act on land, at sea, in the air, and also in space. The Prime Minister even hinted that Israel was responsible for the recent explosions and fires in Iran. Israel has been using satellites for over 20 years. They are an enormously important part of the intelligence gathering system of Israel. Every new satellite that is launched has better technology than the ones that were launched before. Not just a little better, but exponentially higher tech, higher speed transmissions, better resolution, with pictures and videos that are immediately sent. From high up in space, these satellites can even read the license plate on a car parked in a dark alley. They wouldn't send up a new satellite if it wasn't better technology. Indian companies are about to stop exporting tea and basmati rice to Iran. Their complaint is that it is very difficult to get payment from Iran. The CEO of one rice company in India said, and this is a quote, "The payment is very slow and it is coming in small batches. It's becoming impossible to do trade with Iran. The Indian government should work out a deal with Tehran so that exports can be carried out smoothly," unquote. Iran loves basmati rice and Indian tea, and they are a very large importer of both. But when the client cannot send you money, the supplier shuts down the supply. Once again, sanctions are hurting Iran. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. One of the cartoons poked fun at one-way aisles. During the time of the Second Temple, the rebuilt and expanded version of the Second Temple by Herod, they had one-way aisles. This was to accommodate the flow and maximize efficiency. The temple was enormous. It measured a half a mile by a quarter mile and was 11 stories high. The average stones were 70 tons, and the largest stones were 200 tons. There was possibly even a 400-ton stone. When one entered the temple, one first immersed in a ritual bath, a mikveh, and then ascended the one-way steps into a triple gate. It was an arch, triple arch and triple gates called the Hulda gates. Hulda actually means to burrow, to burrow. The gates led through a tunnel, and you exited onto a massive courtyard where, in front of you, slightly to the left, was the structure that housed the Holy of Holies. Sacrifices were offered in various sections, and there were divisions, some only for priests, some only for men, some only for women, some, and one actually, where on a single moment at a single time on Yom Kippur, only one person could ever go once a year, and that was the high priest in the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Now, when you finished, you descended through one-way tunnels and then down the stairs. However, if you were a mourner who had lost your parents that year, then you went up the down staircase, and everyone who greeted you with the expression Hamakom Yenachem, that God should have compassion on you. Hamakom actually means the place, in Hebrew, the place. It is a synonym for God. In that place, on those steps, the derivation and the meaning of the synonym makes perfect sense. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.